Alright, our first coat on our patch is starting to set up. It's still damp, but you can work with it. So I get a fresh sponge out of my water bucket, make sure it's just damp, and I take the edges of the patch and I feather those in with the damp sponge. And I like to go through the patch and just go over it. Then I take my 6-inch knife and I feather it, feather it, feather it, feather it. You can go each way, up, down, side to side, whatever it takes, because all you're doing is you're pushing the mud down and you're taking off the excess mud. Once that's slicked out like that, wet sanded, slicked out, same process. I'm gonna mix some second coat mud. Same thing with some 5-mint mud. I only need a scoop for one patch, little scoop. Add my water, 3/4 of a sponge, and mix up my materials. Mix it, mix it, mix it. Second coat doesn't have to be really thick, but it has to be about like a really thick pancake batter. Because the patch is really coated already, so this is just a final step to make the patch nice and slicked out and clean and perfect. We just take it, same thing like we did first coat. I like to go a little further out than the original first coat. And then this time we push down a lot harder. And then you just let that dry. Same thing, you want to clean up the 5-mint out of your tools before it dries in your tools. Get it all washed out, and then by the time you get everything cleaned up, you'll be ready to slick out and get ready for texture. Alright, our second coat on our patch is starting to set up. It's still damp, so we can work with it. It's been about 4 or 5 minutes. Same thing like the first coat. You want to take a damp sponge, hit your edges. So basically that feathers them out so you don't have a sharp edge. Same thing, I like to get it damp. Make sure your 6-inch knife's clean, and same thing, you just go through and you take off the excess mud. It's kind of like a wet sanding technique, or like you're working with clay almost. You go through and slick it out, slick it out. Perfect. If I left it like that and I primered and painted it, it'd be a perfect smooth patch, but we're not gonna just leave it smooth. We gotta match the texture. Same thing with the texture. I already have some mixed in a bucket. I always like to remix it to make sure it's a nice creamy texture. Consistency of most textures, it barely goes through the beater. It's not super heavy, it's not super thin. With the skip trowel texture or Santa Fe, you can do bigger knives, but let's just do it with a simple 6-inch knife, because people that don't use knives every day, they don't have knife control. So a 6-inch knife is easier to control. So we just get a little bit of mud, make sure it's nice and clean, our 6, and then a basic skip trowel. The same thing like we did on other videos. We go through and we do a skip trowel. Skip trowel, skip trowel, skip trowel. Say I don't like my skip trowel, well let's start over. I don't like what I just did there. Just by slicking this out, I just added another coat over the patch. That's even gonna make it even better. Let's start over. Skip trowel. This time I don't want skip trowel, I want Santa Fe. Well, I can just put a little bit more skip trowel on it and press down with a little more pressure and push down harder. Now we got a Santa Fe. Well, I don't like these textures at all. I want it just smooth. Well, let's just slick it out. Take off all that materials. Now you got a nice skim coat. So it'll be a nice skim coat texture. Say, nah, I don't like a skim coat. Let's go back. I want to skip trowel it again. Skip trowel. That skip trowel's too light. I want it heavier. So you just do a double skip. Double skip. Double skip. Then knocking it down, we always knock down skip trowels. You just lightly go over it. That just knocks over the ridges. And that's a nice skip trowel right there over my patch. So with this regular mud is different from the first coat and second coat mud. This is a regular joint compound. It has to dry overnight. So we can reuse this mud. What we don't use, we save in our bucket. And we cap off our bucket and we save it for the next job, for the next time we need mud. I just put a little bit of water on the top so it doesn't dry out. Put my lid on it and the mud's good for a long time. And now we're pretty much done with this job and we can collect our money. And I usually tell the homeowners, you take a sanding block like this, you let the patch dry for at least 24 hours, a piece of sandpaper, 150 grit, or a sanding block, and then next day you just lightly sand it. A little more effort on the edges and just glide over it. You're not grinding down Bondo or nothing, you're just giving it a quick swipe just to knock the burrs out of the texture. And then once you sand it, you do a drywall primer, a PVA drywall sealer, or a Kilz, and then you paint. And then there